I will now hand over for the opening to Petra Schwager, Chief of the Climate and Technology Partnerships Division here at UNIDO.
Thank you very much, Matteo, and a warm welcome also from my side from Vienna. It's a big pleasure to start the meeting and to have so many nice guests here in the meeting and prominent guests. We very much look forward to a very lively discussion on the opportunities of low-emission ammonia fertilizers, LEAF. And today we will also present our study that we have undertaken in North Africa. And we will present it and afterwards discuss what other opportunities for cooperation can there be to bring forward low-emission ammonia-based fertilizers that have a huge potential for simultaneously strengthen food security, which has become more relevant than ever, reduce emissions from fertilizer production, and create new economic opportunities, but also new industrial pathways for countries and the developing countries, but also emerging economies that very often are also the ones that are producing the low emission hydrogen with which we are then moving forward to ammonia production and transforming it further to fertilizers. Today, we also want to discuss on how we can cooperate on bringing this forward and really acting on concrete programs in developing and emerging countries. We also would like to discuss on potential initiatives in the lead up to COP31, where we aim to present our work and engage with different actors there and bring it forward. A personal word from my side, when we initiated the program of UNIDO, the Global Program for Hydrogen in Industry, some 5 years ago, we always aimed to strengthen the local uptake of low-emission ammonia and to help the countries that are producing also to move forward and to have additional economic gains. This is very important too, and is very much aligned also with the mandate of UNIDO. At the same side, we also see the importance of sustainable trade of low-emission hydrogen. So this is the two ends of our work, and ammonia very well fits into this. And as we speak, we are in contact with, we have technical cooperation programs with 13 countries, and we are seeking the new opportunities to really have a clear focus on low-emission ammonia in the upcoming year. So with this, I hand over to you. I won't be long, and let's get started. Thank you again for your interest.
Thank you, Petra. Thank you very much. And then I will just quickly dive into our low-emission ammonia fertilizers program and the case for LEAF, so low-emission ammonia fertilizers in EMDEs, as Petra was already mentioning before we go over to the presentation of our recent report, which will then presented by the study author. So in general, there is, of course, a huge potential for the production of low-emission ammonia fertilizers across emerging and developing economies, both for low-emission ammonia based on green hydrogen, but also potentially other hydrogen routes. And this is also why this program was initiated, and such fertilizers can contribute to 3 main pillars, which are also part of our mandate at UNIDO, so food security, climate action, and industrial development. Now, beyond there being a potential for the production and use of low-emission ammonia fertilizers, this is also complemented by a picture that is summarized here on this slide on the left-hand side. So probably most of you already know this. Fertilizer application rates across the African continent are quite low, remaining below half of the recommendations of and the targets of the African Union. And in fact, African Union member states have committed to a 10-year fertilizer and soil health action plan to triple the amount of fertilizer used by 2034 compared to 2020, while also increasing domestic production. And meeting those targets, meeting those ambitions, would lead to an additional production of 8 megatons, an additional demand of 8 megatons of ammonia per year. Now, combined with this, of course, also combined with a high dependency of imports. 90% of total fertilizer use across Africa is imported as of today, with a large portion also coming through the Middle East. And this is, of course, also felt quite vividly with sub-Saharan African countries having 35% of imports coming from the Middle East, and some with spikes of 80%, for example, Sudan. And while this sounds theoretical, we have also already seen quite concrete impacts of what this can mean. So during the price spikes of 2021 and 22, following the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, application rates of fertilizers fell by up to 20%, with of course consequences on crop yields. So there is a case to be made. There is a case, and we see this prominently at the example of Kenya, where green hydrogen and green hydrogen-based fertilizers have already been included in national strategies. We also see a pipeline under development, a project pipeline under development in Africa, which can lead up to 1.2 megatons of low-emission hydrogen production per year in 2030. And interestingly, 2/3 of this is already intended for ammonia production, which would be equivalent, and we see this on the right-hand side, to 3.5 megatons per year of ammonia production, or around, if this was used for urea production, for example, this would be around 6.2 megatons per year of urea. Of course, it's difficult to say how many of those projects will come online. Right now, one out of around 30 projects has reached final investment decision, which is why it is important to install risk mitigation measures. On the bottom of the slide, we have listed 4 pillars of risk mitigation, which can contribute to get projects to FID. And we see that, from reducing sovereign and political risk, meaning also working on credit quality, stabilizing energy and industrial policy, meaning also giving investors regulatory certainty, then reducing country risk, meaning protecting investors also from non-economic risks, and working on project-level bankability through loan guarantees and other financial instruments. All of those, of course, are important across different clean hydrogen value chains and are also valid for low-emission ammonia fertilizers. I will try to keep the next couple of slides short, but basically against this backdrop, UNIDO has developed the low-emission ammonia fertilizer program, working on 3 columns which contribute to making business cases more possible. And this does not come out of nowhere, but just as also how our chief was presenting, this is based on our hydrogen portfolio and stems from our global program for hydrogen and industry, which is already active in over 13 countries and is expanding. So with this, we also want to drive more concrete actions towards the next COP to make this topic more visible. And we suggest and wish to work on two main items, which you see here. So a mapping exercise, which you see on the left-hand side, of basically to make visible what actors are doing in this space, and also on a plan to accelerate solutions dedicated to low-emission ammonia fertilizers. But more on this will be presented later on in today's meeting, in today's webinar by Harley Higgins, which is hydrogen facilitator at the Breakthrough Agenda. So I will leave it uncommented for now and hand over to the author of the study, which we recently published. And Abraham, I will ask you to come in now.
Yeah, thanks, Mattia, and thanks everyone for joining this webinar. So basically, we try to look at the opportunities and economic feasibility of scaling green ammonia in 3 selected Northern African countries, right? And as has already been reiterated, ammonia is one of the most important industrial chemicals, right? So it links basically energy systems to food system, right? So currently there is a production of gray ammonia, which is basically based on fossil fuels, right? And the fossil fuels are used to produce hydrogen, which are then combined with nitrogen to produce ammonia, and then used to the production of nitrogen fertilizers, right? So most of the global ammonia production is used in the fertilizer manufacturing, and the rest, the remaining 30% mostly used for plastic and other chemical production, right? And so ammonia is a critical link between the energy systems and food security, right? Basically, because you apply the fertilizers to the plants, to improve the soil condition and also the nutrients in order to boost productivity, right? But as we most of us may know, currently, because it's largely dependent on fossil fuels, then there's these emissions across the value chain. If you can go to the next slides. Right, so across the value chain, we see substantial greenhouse gas emissions across the value chain, right? So then this is what is necessitating us looking into the importance of green ammonia, right? So green ammonia basically is producing hydrogen from renewable energy resources, which are then used to produce ammonia, right? And as has already been said, this has potential of decarbonizing the ammonia production and consequence fertilizer production. But for most emerging and developing countries, this is more than just a climate solution, right? So basically, you'll be able to have the food security that you need, but also reduce your reliance on imported fertilizer. But most importantly, also lead to the development of new industries, right? And so we focus on 3 countries in Northern Africa. Basically, we know that the potential is there, but also trying to see how feasible this will be, right? So, and most of us know that Northern Africa is home to world-class renewable energy resources, but at the same time, also we have established fertilizer industries in there, particularly in Egypt and Morocco, right? And Egypt is the largest producer of nitrogenous fertilizers in Africa, and already has an established industrial base with significant annual production capacity. Currently, they have about 6 million tons of ammonia production annually. And the key player in the industry is the Egyptian fertilizer company. And because of their domestic gas resource, that's what they normally rely on to produce the green ammonia, which is then used to produce the nitrogen fertilizers. But in recent times, there has been this constraint on domestic production. The country had to rely on imports of LNG and natural gas in order to meet the domestic demand. So definitely the green ammonia will provide this alternative power, a more long-term attractive pathway for this country to kind of decarbonize its ammonia production, but also kind of build the industries around that, right? And the second country is Morocco, which is like the largest producer of fertilizer in Africa, right? And the country has one of the largest phosphate rock reserves, right? And so this is what they also capitalize on to produce the fertilizers. And the key player in the industry is OCP, which has about 12 million tons of annual production. But because they have limited fossil fuel resources domestically, they mostly rely on imported ammonia to manufacture phosphate-based fertilizers. And so for Morocco also, this actually provides opportunities to strengthen their security of supply. So basically relying less on imported ammonia, was kind of developing their renewable energy resources to produce a green ammonia, right? And another country is Tunisia. Unlike the other 2 countries, do not have that big industry, but also have like a substantial amount of fertilizer production, which they build around their phosphate resources, right? But also like Morocco, they tend to substantially depend on imported ammonia to produce the fertilizer, right? So together, these 3 countries, they combine in the industrial capabilities. They have the existing fertilizer industries. There's abundant renewable energy resources, and also given their geographic location, to be able to, we thought we would look at this case study to see the opportunities and the economic feasibility of scaling this green ammonia in these countries. Right? And just to reiterate that, so these countries have also, they've actually acknowledged this opportunity, and they have actually introduced ambitious green hydrogen strategies, which have a green ammonia at the center of it, right? And so one of the key questions then that arises is whether green ammonia will be competing for renewable energy resources, right? So to kind of understand this question, we kind of try to see whether, if the country, for example, if Egypt wants to replace their current green ammonia production with green hydrogen, what would be the renewable energy requirement? And similarly for Morocco, if they want to kind of replace their imported ammonia with domestic production, what would be the green hydrogen requirement? And what we found is that the renewable energy capacity required is significant, right? Especially in Morocco, if they want to do that, to be about, if you want to replace the current import of the green ammonia, to take about 5 gigawatts, which is almost similar to their total installed capacity, right? So it's substantial, but it's achievable within the national plans, right? So if you look at the target for 2030, and you compare this renewable capacity that is required to replace this green ammonia production, is within that, in both countries, about 40% of their 2030 targets, right? And so what it means is that the scale required is achievable within the national energy strategies, but also the green ammonia will not necessarily be competing with the energy transition, but rather it will be an important driver of it, right? And so the challenge is not about the endowment of resources, but it's mostly about mobilizing the investment and also accelerating the deployment of these renewable energy technologies, right?
No, thank you. Thank you, Abraham. And I think we see that there is really a lot of work that has gone into the study and into detail. And indeed, we see also of this data that you were presenting. Maybe we can also dwell for a second on the question of the cost of capital and then move to the next part of the presentation.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm just going to go to the cost now. So definitely, as I mentioned, so definitely the resources, and there's more about mobilizing the investment, right? And so actually the key thing is whether this can be produced at a competitive price, right? And so we try to do an analysis to see how the cost compares, right? And not to go into this, one of the things that we found is that especially in Egypt and Morocco, they have the potential of producing this competitively, especially by 2030, especially when you combine solar and then wind resource. So we know that the sun does not always shine, also the wind does not always blow, but the sun will shine mostly during the day, and the wind will blow something mostly in the night. So when you combine this, then you're able to reduce the capital cost per unit of hydrogen produced, thereby reducing the cost of producing this, right? But I think the most important thing is really not even about the kind of the way you configure the electrolyzer, but mostly about the cost of capital, right? So we know that these are capital intensive projects, so the cost of capital has big influence on this project, or they are very sensitive to the cost of capital. So we did some sensitivity analysis and try to vary the weighted average cost of capital. And one of the things that you see that when you reduce the weighted average cost of capital from like 15% to 5%, for example, this will kind of reduce the cost of producing the green hydrogen by about 50%. So about half of that is reduced, right? So basically what it means is that the key factor in kind of having the affordable green hydrogen will be the cost of capital, right? And there are several factors that affect the cost of capital. So the project size is one of them, the financial structure that you have, whether you're going for debt, equity, but also investor-specific risks, mostly about the macroeconomic condition, like the cost of living, right? There are also regulatory risks, looking how stable the regulatory environment is, and infrastructure risks, for example. Let's say in this particular case, the most important one will be about the grid reliability and also investors' access to the grid, right? And so what it means is that in order to reduce the cost of capital, policymakers need to consider these factors, especially looking at each country's specific context, and see how these factors can be dealt with in order to kind of able to attract more affordable capital, right? And so because the green hydrogen is the key input into the green ammonia production, we try to see how this cost translates into the cost of green ammonia. One of the things that you see here is that the green hydrogen cost makes up more than 17% of the cost of green ammonia, right? And so basically, if you want cheap green or affordable green ammonia, you need affordable green hydrogen, right? And what drives the cost of the green hydrogen is basically the renewable energy cost and also the electrolyzer cost. So these two components makes about more than 90% of the hydrogen production cost. And again, in order for you to have cost competitive green ammonia production, then definitely you need cheaper renewables, but also cheaper electrolyzer cost. And again, this also are sensitive to the cost of capital, so affordable finance will be key in doing it. Yes, the next slide. Yeah, so just want to conclude. So definitely we see that the potential is there. There's also the opportunity to produce this competitively, but also in order for these countries to kind of translate this potential into reality, will require some actions, right? So the first one will be the continued investment in renewable energy. It will be essential, as we saw. Competitive green ammonia depends on abundant low-cost renewable electricity. So kind of expanding the renewable energy production at low cost will be key. And then definitely, as we know, these are capital-intensive projects and we'll need the enabling infrastructure to make this work. So this also needs to be developed alongside the production capacity, including the transmission network, the grid, the water infrastructure, transport systems capable of supporting these large-scale green ammonia projects. And I think the third and most important one, which I also show, will be the cost of finance, right? So you've seen that the cost of finance have a major influence on competitiveness of both the hydrogen and ammonia. And so reducing some of the risks and also mobilizing long-term capital will be essential. And then in terms of the regulatory environment, so we need stable policy and regulatory frameworks that can help provide the certainty needed for investors to commit to this large-scale projects, right? So definitely these actions will be able to help these countries transform the vast renewable energy potential that they have into a globally competitive green ammonia industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abraham, and thank you for going through the slides and keeping also the time for our speakers. As you see, there is quite a bit of material and time which went into this report. This was a snapshot of some of the main findings, but we encourage you also to have a look at the full report, which is available online. And of course, we're happy to take questions, which will also be addressed in the dedicated section later on. But for now, I would also go over to now the section of stakeholder interventions, and we're very happy that such a vast and varied amount of stakeholders could make time to be here today. We thank all of you for having made the time. Some of you also from quite distant places. So thank you very much for that. And also in this order, which you see on the slides, I would like to give you the floor, starting with Dr. Henry Webber from the UK Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. Henry, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you, Matteo. And thank you for UNIDO and the Hydrogen Council for arranging this webinar, which has been fascinating to see some of the work you've been doing in terms of case studies in Africa. So yeah, as Matteo said, my name's Dr. Henry Webber. I work within the UK government in the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, and sit in a wider team that's responsible for fertilizer policy, covering all things through from sort of the production through towards the use of fertilizers. Over the last 2 years, the UK has been working closely with other partners to boost the strategic importance of fertilizers and accelerate international collaboration in this space. As identified in the report that we've just heard about and in the broader LEAF initiative, fertilizers are essential for strengthening food security, for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, again talking about the production of fertilizers, but also in their use, for building economic opportunities and looking forwards into the sort of 10, 20, 30 years ahead of us, as well as also thinking about how we can make sure that we have more secure and resilient supply chains and also ultimately agri-food systems from a fertilizer through to sort of food system approach. So On the back of some of this, last year the UK and Brazil launched the Belém Declaration on Fertilizers at COP30, which aimed to mobilise greater action in this space from governments and from non-state actors and industry, bringing really all of the players together to talk about fertilizers as a strategically linked issue, and one that ties energy security through to food security, through various other sort of lenses as well. We wanted to sort of bring that front and centre. But since then, the world's obviously changed with conflicts happening and supply chain pressures from the Middle East. And this has only really added to our message that we launched last year at COP30, that we still need to take action in this area and work together on solutions to make progress. Since then, at London Climate Action Week a few weeks ago, we held a couple of roundtables focusing on fertilizers and also sessions on the LEAF initiative, and discussions from other groups across the week. Obviously, the climate in London on that week was incredibly warm, and it's just showing that with these extreme weather events, it's really imperative we take some of these impacts through now and start taking actions to sort of mitigate that as we go forwards. But the key messages from a couple of these meetings, I'm just going to sort of go through a few of them. I think they're really relevant for the discussion here today. Essentially, solutions do exist, not just in the green ammonia space, in the blue ammonia space, but also in other areas of the fertilizer sort of landscape. But scaling them is still the problem. As we've just heard, it's about scaling that innovation, getting that sort of their usage flowing through into everyday usage, making these products the easiest and most affordable thing really that farmers can use, and that's really still got to be our aim. Demand for low emission fertilizers, again across all types, is weak, and so focusing on demand mechanisms on the demand side seems to be a real sort of critical issue that, again, multiple stakeholders, governments, industry, all need to sort of come together on. Policy alignment is another one where long-term certainty on policy, I think we heard it in the presentation today, is critical for making those business investments plausible and successful. Also, value chain partnerships are crucial to navigate the cost and the outcomes or pathways that we're looking to go down. And no single solution exists. We must look at all of these solutions as a sort of stacked approach. And a lot of these are complementary or work in different ways. So I think it's trying to just recognize that and building on that. So from some of my own reflections, obviously each government has its own different policy priorities, its own considerations to make, and its own sort of policy landscape that they work within. But I think often it's easier to work across boundaries when you can get down into sort of some of the technical aspects of discussions which bind us, the common challenges and the common sort of architecture for solutions. It's if governments can align on some key high-level outcomes and align on some technical action to underpin those sort of outcomes and the sort of pathways to reaching those, I think it will be really successful. And I think if we can move beyond the defining the problem into practical technical actions that start making progress, I think that would be a really good space. And again, both from a government to government angle, but also from business to government and business to business, doing it all in the same sort of pathway. So I think we also need a bit of a menu-based approach to recognise that governments and different businesses are at different places in their sort of, either in the sort of businesses that they're within or the pathways along that sort of business in terms of investment, readiness to scale, commercial sort of level. And so coming up with that sort of menu approach that allows people to choose things that all help with demand signalling, for example, but all ultimately are working towards that same ultimate goal, but allow a bit of agility in approach, I think is really important. And I think that's one example where the work that LEAF's been doing, and particularly around the sort of low emissions fertilizer standard that's been scoped out, I think working on a technical aspect like that is one of those foundational building blocks, along with a bit of that global mapping to see where solutions exist. And how we can sort of scale them, what the market potential is. So I think those are the sort of lasting thoughts I think I'll leave you with. But it's been really interesting to hear so far, and I look forward to a bit more discussion on how we build all of these parts together, and as I say, making sure we're always working in partnership with each other.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you very much. That was a full-fledged menu of inputs across the whole value chain of low-emission ammonia fertilizers, and I appreciate it. I would then directly go over to the private sector and to ask Mr. Madar to come in from OCP Group. Mr. Madar is Senior Vice President, Climate and Decarbonization, and maybe he can also tell us something about the urgency of a standard or something else. Mr. Madar, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, Matteo. And thank you for having me. This is a very important topic, and focusing on a region where we operate and where we are from, which is North Africa. And a few words about OCP for people who don't know us. We're a global operator of phosphate and phosphate-based fertilizers, and 70% of our products are mixed with the ammonia. So that makes us the first buyer of ammonia in the world. We buy almost 2 million tons of gray ammonia per year. So we have this capacity of our own offtake by integrating green ammonia into our supply chain. OCP is more than 100-year operations, so global footprint, where we're #1 exports of phosphate fertilizers in the world. And we operate in Morocco, where we are concessionaire for more than 70% of the world reserves in phosphate. That's a finite element, which is absolutely critical for world nutrition and plants. So that makes us a custodian of this resource, and we have to use it reasonably with responsibility. And that's why we put the sustainability and the right use of the resources for fertilizers, for food nutrition, for food security at the heart of our strategy. So that's very much linked into nitrogen, because we are first buyer of ammonia in the world. We have committed to investment in green ammonia. We have secured the land. We have done the feasibility studies for 3 million projects green ammonia by 2032. That's what we committed for. We have more than 100,000 hectares. So we have been running the measurements, solar and wind. That's a requirement from the banks for the bankability of the project. So, as I said, we have done the feasibility. We have done the pre-FEED as well, and we are very much advancing with our partners, like ENGIE, the global operators in the gas, which is a part of the JV that we have here in Morocco. That makes us very much in this business model of green ammonia and low carbon ammonia. And I do absolutely agree with Mr. Weber, who just spoke about talking about the importance of partnerships, because that's high investments, high risks, and we need partnerships across the whole value chain to share the risks and to lower the risk and for the bankability of the project. He also spoke about the regulation, and that's our policy making. That's absolutely critical, because we are in a phase where those projects bring fertilizer to the market with a premium, and this extra cost cannot be taken by the farmer. He is the kind of the weak link. He's in the center of this supply chain between upstream input providers and downstream CPG, FMCG, etc. off-takers. And the farmer is in the center of this relation and needs to be empowered. And the policy making is one of the tools, either through subsidies, through taxation for other products, but we need to bridge this gap of few years where the scalability is not yet there and the green projects are not yet economical compared to the standard projects. We need I would add to these two topics that Mr. Weber talked about is the importance of innovation. And that's something where we have all the responsibility to invest in, to bring down the costs and to bring the scalability. And that's part of what we are doing also with our university here, UM6P, where we are investing in many green projects for energy storage, etc. We have also in Morocco we have the chance of being in the countries with the best endowments in mixed solar energy and wind power, which makes us having one of the lowest LCOE and LCOH in the world. The fourth point that we need is finance. We need investments and we need finance to flow. And generally, finance does not flow from upstream to downstream. It flows opposite way. We need money to flow from downstream off-takers and also investors and the finance stakeholders because those projects are very capitalistic. So downstream mainly need to take responsibility on that, and because we need to move from a supply-driven transition to a demand-driven transition if we want those projects all to come into FID and to get these projects to the green ammonia and green fertilizers in the market.
Thank you.
Also, the last point that I want to just to talk about is we don't see that we don't take into account very much for those projects is the cost of the insurance. The cost of the resilience. Generally, we look all into investments and we don't see what insurance. The insurance is climbing with the risks that extra risk come into on the food security, on the disturbance of the supply chains. So the green projects are also bringing local-driven solutions to these global challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Madar, and we are aware of the complexity of delivering a holistic picture in a few minutes. And indeed, you touched upon points from the last one being insurance, which is not talked about enough. Of course, the importance of partnerships and regulation and finance. So we are glad, I guess, to see that the priorities of our LEAF program resonate and that we agree at least on what we need to work on. So with that being said, I will hand over now to Linda. Linda Mengetti-Dempsey is Vice President Public Affairs at CF Industries. And Linda, I understand that today you will also be speaking for Hydrogen Council. So the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Matteo, Petra, and UNIDO for your leadership and the opportunity today to join today and share some thoughts. As Matteo just mentioned, I'll be starting by representing the Hydrogen Council and the work that the Council is doing to advance the LEAF initiative as one of the corporate co-leads with that initiative, along with Viveka from Yara, who's also here. I will then speak briefly just a bit about what my company, CF Industries, is doing as well. So the Low-Emission Ammonia Fertilizer initiative brings together an alliance of first-mover governments, obviously the UK and Brazil, that really began this work at the government level, international organizations led by UNIDO, NGOs and businesses across the food, agricultural, fertilizer, sustainable fuels, and manufacturing sectors, including notable CPGs such as PepsiCo and Suntory. In 2025, the initiative helped produce two key deliverables: a market activation roadmap, which sets out the challenges, opportunities, and the potential impact of scaling up low-emission ammonia fertilizer adoption across the value chain. I can put that work in the chat when I'm finished. And then the amassing broad support for the COP30 action statement, which Henry discussed, capturing priority actions agreed collectively by fertilizer producers, food companies, and international organizations. The initial group has grown, and each of the partners has been active on advancing key actions across the three core dimensions identified in the roadmap and the action statement, which are also consistent with the priorities identified by our three previous speakers. So accelerating large-scale low-emission fertilizer investments by closing the cost gap, activating demand, boosting investor confidence and reducing transaction costs through standards, market-based mechanisms, and advancing collaboration on policy frameworks and financial instruments. Sounds familiar from our last speakers, right? The LEAF initiative was also directly included in the COP30 announced plan to accelerate fertilizer solutions, or fertilizer POS, as noted by Henry and Matteo. And I think we all agree that the current crisis in the Middle East gives this work a different context, new urgency, and if anything, the priorities we have identified have never been more relevant than they are today. These priorities call for different solutions in different parts of the world. We've heard the work that UNIDO is doing in the emerging and developing markets, the very markets disproportionately affected by that crisis, by the current crisis. In addition to that progress, I can report that we've seen progress on several fronts from our LEAF partners on standards. The Hydrogen Council is working with CPGs to help streamline corporate reporting obligations under the Science-Based Target Initiative to help unlock demand at scale. On voluntary certification, we've seen the Ammonia Energy Association begin piloting their global ammonia certification system as the US-based VASI verified ammonia certification intensity system has expanded to include ammonia-derived products in 2026. All the AEA, Ammonia Europe as well, which has a certification standard, and VASI are all also working to ensure interoperability between these three primary voluntary certification programs. On demand creation, we've seen progress on CPG buying and low carbon fertilizer demand creation. The LEAF group is meeting at the end of this month to advance our mapping of actions taking and to identify further actions such as those Henry was describing relating to policy, financing, other standards actions that can really help accelerate progress in this area. Finally, just turning to a minute to talk about my company, CF Industries. We're a leading North American-based nitrogen producer, and we've been doing several things, we think, to advance this initiative, most importantly, adding low-carbon supply into the market. So last year, we began operation of a major carbon capture sequestration, CCS project at our Donaldsonville complex in Louisiana, USA, where we are on target to permanently sequester up to 2 million tons of CO2 annually, producing about 1.7 million tons of low carbon ammonia, product that is being now sold in the global market, including North America, Europe, Asia. We are also moving towards the permitting stage to build the largest ammonia plant in the world, also in Louisiana, with our JV partners, JERA and Mitsui. Using autothermal reforming technology and CCS, we expect to be producing about 1.4 million tons of low carbon ammonia. 95% of the CO2 would be removed in 2029. And that complex that we own also has the ability, the capacity for 4 additional world-class plants. We are also progressing a third project in Mississippi, and we expect to have about 3 million metric tons of low carbon ammonia in 2029. We are partnering with key companies to expand the value chain, including PepsiCo, to use low carbon UAN and US potato production going into Frito-Lay potato crisp or chips, depending on your geography. As well, we have a partnership with Poet to advance a low carbon fertilizer used in corn to ethanol production to develop a viable value chain partnership. Thank you for the opportunity, and on behalf of the Council, and we all look forward to working with all of you to advance key policies and actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you very much. And exciting to see also, of course, both sides, what an initiative can do and what a company can do. And glad to see that you're advancing also on the very, very concrete side of things, which we all want to see, namely production and distribution of such products. So in the interest of time, because we're running a little bit late, I would hand over directly to Mr. Yorgo Chatzimarkakis, Chief Executive Officer of Hydrogen Europe. Yorgo, the floor is yours, and thank you for joining. I understand it's not the easiest day, so thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation, dear Matteo. Thanks, Petra, for organizing this. And Hydrogen Europe has been working with UNIDO on the LEAF study. There is a dire need for an uptake in low-emission fertilizers worldwide, and this touches upon three major challenges for Europe and the world. We are all aware of decarbonization, food security, and strategic dependencies. And this topic is one of the clearest cases where EU industrial policy and international cooperation need to move in lockstep. Europe cannot decarbonize its fertilizer value chain in isolation from global ammonia trade flows, and they start to begin. We heard fascinating figures about it. But in light of this recognition, the European Commission, so basically our, if you wish, administrative government in Europe, published the Fertilizers Action Plan, not only resolving the short-term issues stemming from the blocking of the Strait of Hormuz, but also looking into the broader challenges for the market and identifying a shift to low-carbon fertilizers as a solution. I have to say, the plan in itself is candid about a gap worth repeating here. That's money. Fertilizer projects remain underrepresented relative to other energy-intensive sectors in the funding actually awarded so far. And this is a critical point. The eligibility on paper has not yet translated into bankable projects on the ground. And this is why we have been pushing in Europe as Hydrogen Europe, together with our members, for so-called lead markets to create demand for these products. And one genuine lead market for critical chemicals, including fertilizers, of course, would be the fertilizer lead market based also on this fertilizer action plan. The question, however, remains what demand side measures will be developed and how could this align internationally? And we have seen recently this fantastic example of Japan. Only 2 weeks ago, the Japanese Prime Minister visited India, where she opened basically the big contract for difference scheme. They call it backbone also for Indian companies, one of which is our member company ACME. ACME is also one of the suppliers for Yara, and Vibeke will speak after me. But in fact, this is a very broad and simple way to finance the gap. And here's only one precondition as far as we have understood. It's technology not from China. But this is very simple. So what is missing is certification. That's the missing piece of the puzzle. Today, there is no harmonized, bankable way to prove and transfer the green attribute of hydrogen-based ammonia downstream into fertilizers. And this absence, not the technology, is the practical barrier to offtake. And Hydrogen Europe is pushing together with our members, Yara is one of the members, for interoperable, transferable certification for fertilizers with an international angle and recognition. So basically, our ask is quite simple: build in international coordination on certification, interoperability of this, and on demand side instruments like contracts for difference, so that European and global first movers end up building compatible systems rather than parallel ones. The UNIDO conference in Vienna was a big step into that direction. My congratulations to Petra and the whole team having achieved that. And with this, I would like to thank you and happy to discuss this also further.
Thank you, Jorgo. Thank you very much. And I'm glad to hear a little bit of new ideas and a little bit of reinforcement of what we keep hearing. So glad that we're all steering in the right direction. I look forward to the discussion part where we will try to come up now with the concrete next steps. But before that, Vibeke, Ms. Vibeke Rasmussen, Senior Vice President, Product Management and Certification from Yara International, is maybe also very well placed to say a word or two on certification. And now, Vibeke, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Matteo, and thank you for being invited. It's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm representing then Yara International, which is a global fertilizer company, and today also the largest trader and mover of ammonia. We have a clear target of decarbonization of both our own production and also to actually build the new uses of ammonia. Because one of, as been said earlier also, one of the benefits of clean or low ammonia is that it's versatile and has different uses, and therefore is really one of the low energy measures for or molecules for the future. And I think a lot has been said on the production routes and pathways. And just to go a bit what Yara has already done, we have produced low carbon renewable ammonia already for almost 2 years in Norway. And this goes into our Yara Climate Choice Fertilizer, which we already today have on the market through our partners. A lot has been said by Linda and Jorgo and the previous, on Henry also, on how these value chains need to work together. And we have partnered with major food companies and the front runners who are also looking to utilize this as part of their Scope 3 targets. And therefore, we already see that we can decarbonize the food value chain. And as been said, the cost gap between producing hydrogen and ammonia the way we do today and doing it with the clean pathways in the future is quite substantial. And it's really dependent on energy costs, whether it's renewable energy, electrolytic, or from a gas-based CCS pathway. But I think it's important to understand that if we manage to distribute this throughout the value chain, and the closer we get to the end markets, the lower the additional cost on each end consumer good would be. And therefore, it's important that we find mechanisms where we can do that. And we have partners, as I said, with and Linda also mentioned some of the companies that have been the front runners, like the PepsiCos, Heineken's, Lantmannen in Sweden, and others that are already producing or placing products on the market today, which is produced with low emission fertilizers. And I think the way of ensuring that we don't put the onus on the farmers, but work together in the value chain is the way forward and is the way that we can ensure that we manage to do this transition together. And therefore, I think certification and policy framework needs to be made in a way that they're actually aligned on the claims that is made, and that the created upstream certifications actually also can be claimed by obligated parties throughout the value chain. So the harmonization really of these frameworks, political frameworks, certification, and measurements and lead market drivers to ensure that we can finance and close these cost gaps is what is needed throughout the value chain. Thank you.
Thank you, Vibeke. Very clear, on point. And what can I say? I would say, again, in the interest of time, to move on to Dr. Chiara Arruffo, Director of Research at DII Desert Energy. Chiara, you're welcome to take the floor, to say a few words on your work, and maybe also you have a few words on certification to add, or maybe also a different angle from DII. Thank you, Chiara.
Thank you, Matteo, for the introductions. I'm Chiara Ruffo, Director of Research at DII Desert Energy. For those who are not familiar with us, DII Desert Energy is an industry network that connects the Middle East and North Africa with Europe, for example, in what is renewable energy, also green hydrogen cooperation, and derivatives as well, like low-emission ammonia, for example. So coming last among the presenters, many of the points that I had in mind were already touched. In any case, happy to provide some example from some of our partners. I would like to start talking about Morocco. I think you just heard from OCP representative that Morocco holds around 70% of global phosphate reserves and is the Africa's leading fertilizer producer, but at the same time is also the largest ammonia importer with almost 2 million tons per year. So we think that the opportunity there for low-emission ammonia is that for every ton that is produced domestically, it is actually a ton that is not important and also a ton of avoided emissions. Earlier this year, we had a partners meeting in Florence where we had a delegation from Mazen and Areva. And talking about economics, they told us that low-emission ammonia in Morocco is today in the money. And this is also thanks to to one of the strongest onshore wind resources in the region. And this was also mentioned by OCP before me. Moving to Egypt, Fertiglobe is also one of our partners. We know that the Egypt Green Project has already shipped when it was still a pilot, the first internationally certified renewable ammonia back in 2022-2023, and is also the first project that has been awarded under the H2 Global Mechanism, backed by the German government, with aiming at delivering approximately 400,000 tons of low-emission ammonia into Europe through 2033. We know that the project is still a pre-FID today. There have been some delays, but talking about economics for Egypt, I think something was not mentioned before, but it's important to keep in mind that green ammonia would have, it has actually a relatively low cost. However, it has to compete with the fossil fuel subsidies for grey ammonia. So if we would be able to remove those, green ammonia could actually compete today already with those kind of green ammonia as well. And so last example from our partners will be the NEOM project in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. The NEOM project is approximately 90% complete overall, and it will host one of the largest ammonia tanks globally, and it also has a dedicated ammonia export jetty, which is finishing construction. And the first low-emission ammonia exports are targeted from 2027. And I think if we take these three examples all together, they show that there is a real regional opportunity for the Middle East and North Africa, because we have Morocco that shows that there is demand for low-emission ammonia. Egypt shows us that the technology is there. It is a proven technology, and also there are mechanisms to make them bankable. And the NEOM project shows that the region is moving from ambition to reality. And I think the LEAF initiative, in this sense, I think can help us really connecting all these dots. That will be through the risk in finance. I think harmonized standards is critical, and it was mentioned already before also by Yorgo, and also try to connect producers and buyers. And I think I would like to conclude just mentioning that given also the geopolitical situation in the region these days, we've seen that ammonia and urea prices really spiked up within weeks with the supply shocks that we saw due to the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. On the other side, when we look at low-emission ammonia with the long-term renewable contracts, it can really offer price stability, and fossil-based ammonia cannot really do that. So it's not just about decarbonization in general, but also about hedging against geopolitical stability. So with this, I think I conclude, but thank you so much for inviting me today.
Thank you, Chiara. Thank you very much for making time and for providing also the perspective of DIA on the topic. And, I think this complements well also what was said by the other speakers. And in the meantime, we have heard from let's say, the missing speaker so far, Mr. Jerome Namasev, CEO of the Dowers Green Hydrogen Village in Namibia, that unfortunately he cannot join today. Also because there is a field visit from UNIDO colleagues on the side of this project, which is also also supported by UNIDO. So it all comes together quite nicely, even if Mr. Navazev cannot join. And with this, I would hand over to Ms. Harley Higgins from the Breakthrough Agenda. Harley will touch upon 2 items presented at the beginning of this webinar, which we also would like to bring towards COP31. Again, we heard a lot about issues and what we need to do and what makes sense to make LEAF more of a reality. And those are 2 concrete actions which we can work on right now. So Harley, the floor is yours. And if we could move on to the next slide.
Perfect. Thank you, Matteo. And thank you for all the interventions so far. It's been really great to hear the range of perspectives and actions already underway. And I won't repeat what others have said, but it's clear that the momentum is building. And as Matteo said, harnessing that momentum is our objective towards COP31. And sitting in the Breakthrough Agenda, I'm speaking on behalf of a consortium of initiatives where we aim to build on the progress since COP30 that both Matteo and Henry spoke to. And our ambition is really to set out the first steps towards enhanced coordination on the topic as we reach COP31. Because as we know, when there's a lot of good work that happens in parallel, it doesn't automatically add up to a system and accelerated, coordinated action. And that's really the problem that the Breakthrough Agenda gives us a framework for and what we are building as a way forward. And we're not working in a vacuum. The idea is really building on what was presented and established at COP30 last year, where the presidency set out a new architecture for international collaboration under the Global Climate Action Agenda, in which many of you will know we launched what's known as the Plans to Accelerate Solutions. So the structure for coordinated action does exist, and our approach through the LEAF program has been to work inside this. So with low emissions ammonia fertilizer sitting across both the hydrogen plan to accelerate solutions and the fertilizer plan to accelerate solutions that were both launched last year, and it really being a question of the 2 industries and having 2 halves, it's really important that we move together. So at once we displace the grey supply, but also we build the clean demand. So the 2 things that we're proposing for COP31, alongside showcasing project announcements from anchor partners that we've heard from, are a landscape map and what will be known as a sub-plan to accelerate solutions. So the landscape map is very much what it sounds like. Within the COP30 LEAF action statement last year, there was recognition of a long list of initiatives already underway, all extremely substantive, all growing, as we've heard, but with no real single view of who delivers what across the priority actions that were agreed and stated. So the map, and many of you might have seen them under the Breakthrough Agenda for other sectors, is really a visualization tool which shows partners on what work is being done and on what topic. So really we have a whole view of the entire landscape, the entire multilateral ecosystem, so that we can move in a coordinated way forward and hopefully accelerate on synergies together. So partners can see where they have synergies for collaboration, potential overlaps, funders can see which outcomes are potentially under-resourced, and anyone coming into the landscape or has interest on the landscape can really sit where they fit and where they can gain support. The second, and this is the most substantial part, is the joint sub-plan to accelerate solutions between the hydrogen and fertilizer passes. So hosted by the LEAF program, we aim to fit within the structure of the Global Climate Action Agenda and present a plan of actions from all partners based on the 3 priority actions that we agreed at COP30 within the action statement. The first being closing the cost gap and activating demand. The second on standards and market-based mechanism to boost investor confidence. And the third being on public-private cooperation on policy frameworks and financial instruments, and really setting ownership to actions underneath those priority outcomes with clear timelines, specifically as we look towards the next global stock take and short-term needs that are required, and where we can really enhance that coordinated international coordination and work together. So with that, it is an open invitation to all of you who are working on this to participate in the frameworks that we're building for COP31 and within the framework that it will establish for joint delivery of actions. So we will be reaching out as we build on this momentum and hope to deliver something substantial for COP31 that sends this joint signal of delivery and action. So with that, Matteo, I'll hand back to you, but the invitation is open to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Hali. Thank you for the great overview. Yes, so we've heard quite a bit about what is needed and also how we could move this forward, in part at least through this last bit, but also through the suggestions and comments from the other speakers. And for very practical purposes, what does it mean to participate also in those frameworks? Of course, you have all received an invite through our channels. Feel free to reach out. We will also leave our email address from our hydrogen program here in the chat. And of course, most of you already have our contacts. So let's continue this conversation. And in the spirit of continuing the conversation openly, I would now go to the next section of this webinar for the next 15 minutes, possibly 20, for an open discussion between all of you. And this means between the invited speakers and also from the public. I have noted there were a few questions and remarks in the Q&A. But they also go in the direction of the four guiding questions which we have prepared for today, which are on the next slide. And I already see that there is one hand raised from Yorgo. So Yorgo, if you wish to unmute and go ahead, please do. And for the rest, please also feel free to refer to the guiding questions. Yorgo.
Thank you very much. We might ask ourselves, why should such an extra award, such a premium, such a contract for difference be paid? So this is something people want to know. And so far, it was clearly, we talked about COP, the climate agenda, but let's be absolutely honest. People are shifting their priorities at the moment. And we regard the whole climate debate as not over, not at all. It's the opposite. It will continue. However, the new urgent need is strategic molecule sovereignty. The example that I mentioned, this Japanese example, is telling, because here Japan opens basically their taxpayers' money for making sure there is a reliability of supply in some strategic molecules, namely green ammonia or ammonia in general and methanol. And this leads us to the understanding that it makes sense to reduce vulnerability from being dependent. So that's the European approach, to try to source as much as we can from European renewables and soil, but to diversify in the international cooperation, the partnerships, in order to make sure this reliability of supply is given. This, we call it resilience value, this aspect of making yourself more resilient via international partners will become an issue of funding. And this is where we exactly have to focus upon, and this is the work we are doing right now. Thank you. Just wanted to clarify this.
Thank you, Yorgo. Thank you. It's a complex field. We wish to develop new markets with technologies which are on different TRL scales. and to make them resilient at the same time. That being said, it is difficult, but it's not impossible. It just needs to be done. And in order to be done efficiently and effectively, we need to align. So I think this is also what we've heard today throughout the interventions. And maybe also a very concrete question could be then again this can be an occasion to restate the key priorities which could be placed on global stages, such as the COP31. So we've heard of two potential exercises, or two exercises which we wish to put forward. We've heard of ongoing cooperations. Is there, from the participating speakers, any comment on what you would like as a main outcome, let's say, of COP31 related to low-emission ammonia fertilizers? Okay, I see no direct reaction, so we are just all in agreement that we need to cooperate. And I see one hand raised from Linda. Thank you, Linda. And excuse me, also another hand from a participant, which I kindly ask to revert to the Q&A section for better coordination. But Linda, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matteo. And, I think what would be helpful at the next COP is to take this LEAF initiative a step further, to identify across the three chains, the three priority action areas, more specific items that governments can and should do, and/or those areas for greater public-private partnership. I certainly think, consistent policies, durable policies, not changing policies that advantage low-emission fertilizer going forward. And there can be a menu approach. I thought, Henry's comment there, whether it's a well-constructed, durable carbon border adjustment mechanism, whether it's the CFDs that Jorge was talking about, whether it's other types of programs that recognize and perhaps things in the clean fuels area, or that help spur that demand all the way down to the CPGs. I think those are all the types of programs, and I think identifying that would be helpful. Similarly, on financing and standards, I think having that greater level of specificity, but not in a hugely confining way, but giving that menu of opportunities. But again, stressing these are large-scale commercial investments that will be online for decades upon decades, and so having durable policy initiatives and other initiatives would be most helpful.
Thank you, Linda. A good overview of, we need a good overview of what is being done, and we need durable and reliable policy certainty in order to make sure that the investments that are made and the products that are produced are actually relevant on the market for the coming years and decades, hopefully. So points taken on that, then going in the direction of a standard, Do you and do other speakers believe that there is any part of a standard on low-emission ammonia fertilizers which is being overlooked or which is particularly difficult? Why hasn't it been developed thus far? What do you believe, and where would you start? Vibeke, please.
And I think the challenge on fertilizer itself is that there are so many variants and different products. So that is the challenge on starting from, and that's why I think it's easier if we can start on some of these voluntarily certification schemes that do exist on ammonia, and then, or clean ammonia, and then do the next steps on how do you get those into mechanisms that can work also for the fertilizers. I think it's very important that we don't make it too complex. And I think the discussions on mixing in a lot of nutrient use efficiency tools and practices on farms and everything is making it too complicated for a standard, because this needs to be focused on the fertilizer itself and the product, and it's really the production pathway which is decarbonizing. The end grain of the fertilizer that the farmers see is the same. The molecule has the same formula, independent on how it's produced. So I think that is really looking at the label or a way that we certify it and link it really to the carbon intensity. I think that is what we need to focus on. And although all these other measures are important, but they are packaged different from the label, the standard of the low emission ammonia fertilizer itself.
Thank you, Vibeke. Point taken. A standard on the production pathway and the GHG intensity, and not a standard which aims to go too much beyond that scope, because otherwise we risk to create something that cannot really be applied efficiently or effectively, and maybe was also past what we want. Maybe there is also a direct comment on this. Maybe there is someone who says, no, we do need a standard which encompasses more. Either way, Chiara, you had your hand raised, so I will, the floor is yours. Thank you very much. And we cannot hear you right now.
Sorry, I didn't put the microphone on. Was just to say that I agree with that, because we've seen that complexity in standards really doesn't help. We've seen the same with hydrogen, discussing colors and then emission-based. And so I actually agree very much on the fact that we need to really set the boundaries. What are we certifying? It needs to be clear, needs to be simple, and needs to be applicable. So in that way, also the across the value chain, everyone can really see, okay, this is the certification, and also for the end user can also see what I'm actually buying at the end, because something that has been not discussed, but I think is also the end user of that as a cost applied to the standard, if you want. So I think it should be easy enough and simple that can be understandable across the entire spectrum and the entire value chain.
Thank you, Chiara. Point taken. And maybe there is also an overlap with the newly existing ISO standard for hydrogen. Maybe not. If some of the speakers want to come in on a parallel to that, please do. And for now, we have a hand raised from Mr. Nafal. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I think it's an interesting debate that we are having about the certification. I agree with the fact that we need to focus on simple things to have a real evaluation of the traceability and the potential of the product. But at the same time, if we don't evaluate the full life cycle of the products from cradle to grave, scientifically, we might be producing green products, but they generate worse environmental impact at the use stage. Yes, we need to make it simple. At the same time, how to ensure that what we put in the market is really, even if it's green, that's really the best fit for the environment use. Because yes, our production of fertilizers is 1% of global GHG emissions. Agriculture is 23 to 24% of global GHG emissions. And I think we need collectively to have a systemic approach to bring solutions to this global problem.
Thank you. Thank you again. Point taken on the reiteration of the scope also, and to make sure that we do not create something that let's say mismeasures what we're actually producing and misrepresents it. So thank you for that. If there are any comments from the other speakers, please, you're welcome to come in. I see that Henry has his hand raised, and we also have a comment in the chat from a UNIDO colleague. So thanks, Gabriel, also for raising this on the ISO 19870-3, which is under development and addresses the emissions associated with the production, storage, and transport of ammonia from hydrogen up to the delivery gate. So thanks for raising this within this context. And Henry, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Matteo. I know there was another hand up just before me. I don't know if you wanted to go to them first. I was after. But...
Thank you. I think we're trying to condense all the questions from the public in the Q&A section. Okay. So thank you, Henry.
All right, brilliant. Yeah, I think I was just going to reflect on the comments so far on the standard side, and I agree. I think we have to sort of balance these different lenses together. We need simplicity. We need to think about something that is easy to implement and that is clear, I think, and transparent, so that when we're talking about a low emission fertilizer, it's got to be understandable from a farmer's perspective or from a supply chain perspective that is up until the point of use. And then, yes, I completely agree that once you use a fertilizer within, an agricultural system, it gets more complicated very quickly. And I think that doesn't mean we shouldn't deal with that either. We definitely need to try and work out ways of doing that as well, but that could be done in a different bucket of work. I think we can maybe sort of just start dividing these things down into a couple of different buckets where we can do product certification and then something around a nutrient use efficiency certification or something like that. You could do it in different ways, which might be a way of breaking this down, but not misaligning on some of that, because we've definitely had comments from previous stakeholders who said that a low emission fertilizer doesn't mean it's low emission when you apply it, and I think that's just really a clarity problem and just getting people to understand what that means. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Henry. It seems to me that this discussion needs to go on. And now we have almost reached time for today's webinar. So I would say for the final words, because it is for the final words, I will now hand over again to Petra Schwager, Chief of our CTP division. Petra, the floor is yours. From my side, just a few words of thank you to all the participants and to all of you in the public. I think it was a very, again, fruitful discussion. We touched upon several topics and now dwelled more into the issue of standards, certification, and how to, let's say, get the property, to transfer the property along the value chain in a way that makes sense. But this is not, of course, the only issue. There are several ones, and we need to do also mapping. But for the closing, again, I hand over to Petra. Petra, the floor is yours. And from my side, again, thank you very much for the fruitful engagement today. Petra.
Thank you very much, Matteo, and thank you so much to all speakers. I think it was a very, very insightful webinar, and it showed also how we team up, or how we need everybody on this in this undertaking. And you mentioned also the value chain approach, so that we would need to bring in the different partners to really bring the prices down and not to put the burden on the farmers. It was also very enlightful to hear about standards. Standards are very I have worked a lot with standards, also on other standards. And to bring all the expectations together is not an easy undertaking. We have to be profound, but also be pragmatic. So take it as a step-by-step approach and see how we get where we need to go. We have our experience also. We're working very closely with ISO on the low-emission hydrogen fertilizer. So hydrogen standard, not fertilizers, not yet. So we will see how we can bring all the expectations together. I also understand that we need the lead market, so please count also on UNIDO to support this and to see how we work together with first movers and create encouraging policies to bring this forward. So in a nutshell, I really want to thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your wisdom with all of us, and we look forward to work together with you, not just in the upfront for COP, but really in real actions on the countryside. And here is where we as UNIDO also see our role. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who was listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.